So now we want to introduce our guest. Today we have on a different perspective. We are having on a sibling perspective. And this is very important, we feel, in the whole adoption story. And I met this girl in advertising, and she's just amazing, has taken me and his family in Los Angeles. And Sarah is friends with her too. We're just thrilled to have her on. And please welcome Denise Cruz Castino.
Hi, thank you,
So happy
ladies.
to have you, Denise.
Oh, thank you. I'm so honored because I love what you guys are doing with this podcast. And I just think it's amazing because I think you guys sharing your journey of adoption is really going to help people who, have gone through it themselves. So I think this is an amazing podcast and I'm honored to be on your show.
Thank you.
Yeah. So obviously I'm a sibling.
Of an adopted person.
Of an adopted person. So my younger brother, Kenny, we adopted, not me, but my family adopted him. My parents adopted him when I was 5 and Kenny was 4. So we are 6 months apart. And,
where was he prior to this?
His parents, so we grew up in LA, Latina family, big family. And, I guess met him, and I didn't realize it, at a picnic at Griffith Park with all our Latina relatives. And there's a picture, after we had adopted him, I found the picture and I was like, oh, I met him, and they took like this big family picture of all the cousins. So he was a cousin. And there he was sitting there, little Kenny,
Kenny.
So cute. And so it turns out his grandfather and my grandfather were brothers. And his parents were unable to raise him because his dad had accidentally been shot in the head by a stray bullet.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he was functioning, but his mental facilities just were not all there. And his mom, sadly, was on heroin and was in and out of prison. And so by the time my parents decided to adopt him, I guess the relatives had all gotten together. And I guess Kenny had been going from family to family to family. And the relatives finally said, somebody needs to adopt this child and bring him in and raise him.
How long had he been going from family to family?
I'm guessing those whole 4 years. I'm not exactly sure at what point, they figured this out. Again, I was 5, so I never really got to ask my parents, like, when did that start,
And did your parents ever bring up those things, or it just was like?
I don't remember when I found that out, because it was just like, hey, we are going to have a new brother. And, that was the thing, like from the moment, because listening to your stories and how maybe some kids would be like, make fun of you, like, oh, those aren't your real parents. Like none of that came up for us. It was just like, we have a brother and he's 4. Like, it was just like, okay. And I never thought of anything different. It was like, this is my brother. Like it was, I don't know. It's interesting to hear that some kids would judge a kid for that because it never felt like he wasn't my brother. From day one, here's my brother. He's 4. It just is what it is. And when he first came to live with us, we had this teeny tiny house in LA. And so he was in my bedroom. We had 2 beds. And it's like, I had this really funny story too. Like, before my parents just, got a new house that I could have my own room again as a girl. I remember him waking up in the middle of the night and in his sleep peed on the floor. So here's this girl going, what's going on? And I'm all, Kenny.
Oh.
And he's like peeing on the floor. And then he wakes up like, what? So maybe that's when my parents went, it's time to get her own room. I don't know. So, but yeah, so then we got a bigger house where I got my own room again. And then he shared with my older brother, Greg, and then my oldest brother, Randy, got his own room. And I just remember when he first started living with us, he just had a lot of anger, that didn't exist in my household. I don't think it was towards us, but it was on the schoolyard. I just remember he was always getting into fights. And it just was what Kenny was. It was just, this kid is angry. And as an adult, I can look back and see the pain that was in him, because he didn't understand what was going on. And it was kind of funny because he would always, beat up some kid. And it was funny because finally some inner city girl, this young Black girl, she beat him up, and she was the same age, you know, but she was like bigger, because you know how girls could be so much taller. Oh, yeah. So I just remember thinking like, oh, that's funny. This girl beat him up. Like, you know, it was just sort of, someone put him in his place, you know.
I remember that anger because I knew Kenny, and I remember he just mad. Is anything going on at the bar? He'd be like, I'm there.
Yeah. And it was like, you know, if you met him, you loved him, you know.
Adored him.
You know, he worked in sales sometimes. Like, he was very personable.
Charming.
Very, very charming, right? Mm-hmm. But like, one person looked at him the wrong way, and that anger was there, you know. And like I said,
did he ever get any help, therapy?
He did, you know, like, I can't remember when that started, but let's say maybe not till high school, maybe college. I'm not sure what age the therapy started. And I don't know if it was his choice or my parents' choice. I don't really remember. And as an adult, I remember saying to him, and you guys, it wasn't an adoption. He saw his parents, he spoke to his parents because they just couldn't take care of him. And I said to him as an adult, you know, Kenny, you knew your parents couldn't raise you. They loved you. It wasn't that they wanted to give you up. And I said, and you got so much love from our parents, and you got therapy. Why is it that you're still so angry? You know? And I was just so curious about that. And he said, you know what, I don't know. And he said, I do know that, like, in my mind, I know that. He's like, but I can't, for some reason, still get rid of that anger. And he said, to be perfectly honest, because, like, again, the way his mom grew up, they grew up in East LA, in a poor neighborhood, rough neighborhood, you know, Latina, that kind of stuff. His brother was like in and out of gangs. And he said, you know, Denise, if I had grown up in that family, I probably would have been dead at like 14 or 16 or something, you know? So he's like, yes, you know, it's tough. And I wish I could deal with this anger. I don't know why I have it, but I'm so much better off being in this family. So it's interesting, as an adult, he could sort of understand it, but he still couldn't grasp it. He really couldn't get to the root of, you know, they always say, like, you know, therapists, those first 5 years are so formative in an adult, you know. Oh yeah. And, you know, those 4 years, who knows what he saw in those 4 years.
And you know, no matter how, like, I was trying to talk to my mom about this, no matter what, you know, on a logistical level, it's still that, you know, that child that was left.
Yes.
They don't know the difference. And
no.
So,
yeah, I don't know how you get through that. You know, I don't know how you heal that, you know, because he, like you said, he was going to a therapist and he was discussing all that stuff, but it's still, there was just always this anger in him.
And he had, I think, you know, when I met you, he was your brother. I mean, I just assumed Kenny. And in fact, I thought you looked most like him. Like, you know, I just knew Kenny was your brother because your whole family was like, this is my brother. There was never, we only brought up adoption together. You know, I got to know him. We were all hanging out. And I'm like, I'm adopted. He's like, oh, I am. And then you're like, you know that about Kenny? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
But he was really like, oh, you're adopted, like a thing for him. He felt, but you couldn't, I could see it in him. It's like a, insecurity or something like that.
Yeah, maybe.
He just wore it. I mean,
yeah, he definitely, I guess, maybe always felt something was missing, I guess.
Yeah.
You know,
probably the same wounds that we all have shared as adopted people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
But then adding in, you know, actually seeing his parents, and
that's an interesting dynamic.
And still not living with the, you know, that I don't know, maybe that add an extra layer.
Yeah, you would think it would help, right? Like, oh, I get to see my parents and they just can't take care of me, as opposed to don't want me, you know, because I think when adopted children don't know why they were given up, right? Then it's the wonder, but he knew. And
it's still kind of like, why
can't they get it together?
Why can't they get it together?
Well,
to be with
for
me.
His mom, especially maybe it's the mom wound, because the dad, he was always in touch with. I don't know how when he was little, but when he was an adult, I think his dad lived in like Atlanta, Georgia or something. So he would go fly out and see him.
And he had cognitive issues though.
Did his mom ever get sober?
I don't think so. And I don't remember. I think she died from it. And I don't know when. but maybe as a
Yeah.
child, that's tough to like, well, why can't you stop this? Because,
Yeah.
heroin's just one of those drugs where
If
it's,
I were lovable enough, you would stop
yeah,
using drugs,
right. And maybe that's where a lot of
and
the
then the
wounds,
rage.
yeah, maybe that's where a lot of the wounds come from, more than his mom than the dad even. Because, that mom love, it's like they should fight for you, right?
Yeah.
It's like you feel like the mom is the one that's supposed to protect you,
And what about, I mean, speaking of, because you mentioned death, I mean, I was at your father's funeral. I knew
Right.
your father passed, and
Yeah.
what took place there for Kenny? I know it was
Sure. Yeah.
I even
So
remember.
yeah, I know you were there for me. Thank God. And,
Yeah.
so that was, like my first year out of college, and, my, 23, and my dad died suddenly he had a head injury the year before, and it should have been fine. So it was a shock. It was a complete shock to everybody. And it was interesting because Kenny, everybody deals with grief in their own way. Right. And Kenny just took charge of everything, just was like organizing paperwork and handling. I think my mom did a lot of the funeral preparations, but like, I don't know, Kenny just like, you didn't see any grief out of him. Like grief for me was like instant. Like I was just in shock. I was emotional. I was a wreck. And Kenny just there was not one emotion out of him when this was all first happening. So then the funeral happens, and my dad, like he was always in like Rotary, the groups, and YMCA, so like volunteered for everybody. So there was like, it happened at the church, I forget what it's called, but in Sherman Oaks, and it's maybe seats like 500 people, and it was packed. It was packed, right?
Like
and the priest even called my mom and said, who is your husband? Like, because it was her ex-husband at this point. Like, who is he famous? I don't know. Why are so many people here? So, obviously as the kids were in the front row and they're mentioning, Kenny, or not Kenny, they're mentioning my dad, and Kenny just is sobbing like a wreck. Like when you see those movies where like the mom like throws herself on the, like, that was Kenny. Like it was, and that was what I wanted to say about him, was a loss for him. Like obviously this was so hard for all of us, but a loss for him, it's just gets to this wound. Maybe it's like picking at that scab or something. Like he can't have people leave him.
It's abandonment issues.
Abandonment issues. That's what it is.
100%.
That's what it is. And like, here I am, a wreck. I'm 23, I'm not doing well. And now here's my brother who can't even stand. And that was just so painful. And I'm so immature at that age. I don't know what to do with him. I don't know how to be the strong one right there. So I don't even know how we helped him. I think we just all hugged him. And the other thing that happened at the funeral, which was so painful. And so one of my dad's really good friends starts, given whatever I want to talk about Mark, blah, 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 what a wonderful man he is, left by his, 3 kids and his nephew, Kenny.
I mean, literally, I
was like, wait, what? And then he kept saying it.
Yes.
He kept saying it. And I'm like, a few times.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, wait, my brother just lost his dad and you're calling him a nephew? Like here again, 23, there's 500 people. I'm like, do I yell at this man in front of everybody? like I said, from day one, this was my brother. It never crossed my mind he wasn't my brother. And so I'm thinking, this kid is like, even if this man thinks this, even if my dad ever called him that, which I don't think he ever did, this is not the time to bring this up.
Did Kenny notice it?
I don't think he did, because I think
he was so crying in his grief,
and was broken up so much that like
half the audience noticed it, because we have all different friends in advertising. My ex-husband was there, and people were like, I didn't know that was his nephew.
Oh, really? So people noticed it. Yeah. So I didn't know.
Talking about Kenny's, like,
like I wanted to designate. Okay. Yeah. It was weird. So I don't know. I felt now's not the time to mention this. He lost his father. He lost his father.
People do. We had a discussion about this recently.
It just made me so mad. So I don't know if I could go back in time, would I have yelled at this man? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe.
What was Kenny close to your mom?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, yes, for sure. My mom treated every child the same, but different. And maybe all moms do that. So there definitely were times I'm like, is she being hard on him because he was adopted? Like, I don't know. And Kenny was not an easy child.
Yeah. Did he have a bad adolescence?
Mostly, like I said, mostly just the fights,
No substance abuse or anything?
no, nothing like, kids go to parties and have, beer or stuff like
Yeah.
that, nothing bad. He would get in trouble in high school, like, but we both would. And I think because we were 6 months apart, and I think we would sort of bond during those high school years because like my mom, I don't know, she sort of let the older brothers sort of like, Randy was a surfer. So it was like, he can do his own thing. And then Greg was like the straight A model child.
The perfect kid.
Perfect kid. So like, I don't know what he's doing because he wasn't a perfect kid. And Greg, you weren't. And and so they let him get away with stuff. And so then Kenny and I were always like grounded for not doing anything. Like it was just sort of like, I know you're going to be up to no good. And we were like, but we haven't even done anything, right? And so we would always get in trouble together. So that sort of bonded us. And again, like maybe because we were close in age, we always were sort of there for each other in certain ways. And
you guys were cute together.
Yeah. And I remember him saying like as an adult, because I didn't remember doing this, that in high school, we both went to different private schools.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you went to the same school. So
yeah, we went to different private schools, and it was more because I went to a school called Chaminade in the Valley, and he wanted to go to this all boys school just on his own. He could have gone with me, but he decided to go to Chaminade. And Chaminade was, he went to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was actually more strict than Chaminade at the time. I don't know now. And so he would get in trouble for who knows what, like all these things all the time. And so my dad, I guess, made him wear the same clothes for an entire week. I don't even remember this. And so Kenny told me as an adult,
like the worst thing you can do to a teenager.
Oh my
teenager, God. Right? Because it's like your clothes matters, right?
Your clothes are your identity as a teenager.
Your identity. And my dad knew that. My dad's like, oh yeah. And so Kenny told me as an adult, oh yeah, you snuck clothes out for me in a backpack and you handed them to me. And every day you would give me clothes so I didn't have to wear the same clothes. I'm like, I did? That was nice of me.
Because then you would have been grounded if you'd gotten caught.
Yeah, I don't know.
You were very fashion forward even.
You would have been wearing the same clothes.
Yeah, I would have been. It didn't even dawn on me that I could have gotten in trouble. I was just like, oh, you can't do that to a kid in high school. So I just was like, I just felt
Denise knows her fashion. You can.
I know my fashion. You do not mess with fashion.
What did he? So I'm just thinking, his coming from his early childhood background and his brother and his biological family. Was he able to find a career for himself and
Yeah. I mean, he did always kind of, I think, struggle with what he wanted to do. Like he got into advertising a little bit like I did, but I think he was kind of in sales and advertising.
And then he did like construction. He did stuff for us.
Well, he did tile. He did tile because that was what Randy did. So it was interesting. Like I said, the earlier years, I think Kenny and I maybe had those more bonding years together. And then I think as he got older, I think he bonded with our oldest brother a lot because they were both surfers. So then they really bonded over that. And then Randy is a tile person that he has his own business. Mm-hmm. And so then Kenny would do tile with him. And then I think, like I said, he did advertising for a while. Then I think the tile kind of became like, oh, I'm good at this. I don't know if it was his passion, but his passion ended up being flying. So then he bonded with the other brother over that. So Greg is a pilot, went to Annapolis, again, the straight A, got into Annapolis, was maybe going to be an astronaut at one point. And so Kenny always wanted to fly. He was one of those kids that played with like the military ships that you would build, and like him and his friends in the neighborhood had those toy guns and they'd play army, that was always his thing. And so he would say to me, like, I always love that Greg's flying. And he'd always talk to our friends that like would fly helicopters. And he's like, this is what I've always wanted to do. And I'm like, well, why aren't you, Yeah. So he finally, did it, he, didn't go to Annapolis. He didn't go that route, but he, did his flight training, flight hours, all that kind of stuff. So he finally got to be a pilot, and it was his dream. And, but sadly, it's what he died from.
Yeah.
He died from being a pilot. And
how did that happen?
Oh, that was just like, again, so tragic. We weren't expecting it.
We were on the phone when you got that call.
Well, I think I texted you and then luckily Louise was there to help me through it because again, another loss, like, hey Louise, guess what? So basically it was just so crazy. So I had, advertising writer and a screenwriter. And so I had mostly just been, home with my son and focusing on my screenwriting. And if somebody would call me for an advertising job, I would do it. But I didn't want to get fully back into that career, because advertising could be 60 to 80 hours a week. And I didn't want to do that with a young kid. So I finally was like, oh, I'm going to take a job. I'm going to do this. And so it was my first day on my first advertising job since I had a kid, right? Like in an office, like not at home. And I called my mom. So my mom had been in the hospital just for tests, nothing bad. They just wanted to test some stuff. So I call her on my lunch break and she's sobbing. And I'm thinking, oh, she got bad results. It's okay. Well, we'll get through this. So I'm like, Mom, it's okay. We'll get through it. And she's like, can barely talk to me, sobbing. No. And I'm like, what's going on? So this other woman gets on the phone, and I guess it's like a grief person at the hospital or something. And she says, your brother Kenny died in a plane crash, died instantly. Your mom is next of kin, the first person they call. And I'm still in shock, because I'm like, well, how do you know? You're not there. Like when you hear this news, you're thinking, well, I'm not there. How do I know it? It's probably fine, Yeah. So the woman's like, no, your mom is next of kin. They didn't call his wife first. They called your mom. And that's when I'm like, oh, crap, this is for
They
real.
didn't call his wife first.
No,
wow.
He didn't want that. He wanted, because I think he knew his wife would be traumatized by this.
She had a young baby.
I think they had a young baby. So it's been 10 years now. This year it was 10 years, which is crazy to me. And they wanted, I guess he wanted the family to know before his wife, obviously that's his family, but like to someone be there. So, I text Louise after this and I'm like, oh, great.
It was on the news. I mean, because it was in Los
It was
Angeles,
all over the news. Yeah, it was at the Long Beach airport. And Louise is like, you've got to go home. And I'm like, but I just started my job.
She literally was like in shock.
I was in shock. And so I'm like texting my husband and he's like, well,
I'm coming to get you.
Like, yeah, the two of them are trying to tag team, like get her to go home, And I finally listened to them and, because Louise is like to my husband, like, she's in shock.
Alex, go get her.
Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'll drive home. And I literally sobbed the whole way home. Like, cause I still didn't think I was sad, but like tears were forming pouring down my face and I'm like, it's probably not safe to drive home this way, 405 all the way to the valley. And I walk into the house and I just look at my husband and my son, however old he was little. And I'm just like, I'm just going in my room. And they're like, okay, like and I just, cried for sure that whole day. And then who knows how long. And then my sister-in-law texts me and is like, I'm driving straight to see, Kenny's wife. I don't think she knows yet. I want to be there when she finds out, know? So it was just, and
he was finally getting like the love
well, that's interesting because there's a lot of thoughts in this. So he, didn't obviously have the family that he thought he wanted, right? And he got that with his wife, such a great partner. They were so great together. He was a great dad. He was kind of like the hands-on dad. Like his wife had the full-time job. He did the tile, he did the flying here and there. And so he really got to be a hands-on dad. And it felt like it made him that whole family he had been looking for. I don't know if you guys felt like that when you guys had your blood, child, like, yes. And you could see that something was healed there for him. And on one hand,
softer.
Of course it was
softer.
Yeah. And like, just loved her, loved her, like the light of, and it was so sad. Like, wait, now she's not having that father. So it's so interesting. And then, but part of me thinks maybe he just was supposed to have that healing and that was all he was supposed to have. And then the bummer thing too, of course, was when he died, I said to my mom, when she told me, literally as we're crying, he died doing what he loved, Mom. Yeah. That's not a horrible thing, Of course we didn't want him to die, but this is what he loved, So it was interesting.
And he did love it. He loved flying.
He loved flying, So it's the wounds he had, like it's like they healed for him, and maybe that's all he needed. I don't know. Why did he go so young? I don't know.
God, yeah, makes me sad.
I know.
Picturing that.
I know. Yeah. And his daughter was 2.5. And,
she was my neighbor, right?
Yes. Right. Because you've met
I was going to
them.
say
That's
that.
right.
Yes.
That's right. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny that you
Small world.
I know. They lived on the same street.
Yes.
I'm like, because you're like, oh, I'm moving to Culver City. I'm like, oh, my sister-in-law and niece live there. And you're like, oh, I'm moving to this street. I'm like, I think that's where they live. And then we went to a barbecue neighborhood.
We all went to your cute little street barbecue.
Neighborhood party. Yes.
That was so funny.
And are you close to your sister-in-law now? And
yes.
Your niece?
And it's interesting because after he died, like I would always try to see him, right? Like, when he had his baby or even before that, and Kenny was always too busy. He'd be like, yeah, I'm going to get together with you. But he was always making all these other plans, very flaky. He'd be like, I'll be over. And then you wouldn't see him. I would try so hard to be in touch with him, and he just, I don't know. He always seemed like he had other people he needed to see. And that was interesting. When he died at the funeral, all these relatives that I didn't even know he had, but maybe they were his relatives, maybe not mine, that whole cousin thing. And they'd be like, oh yeah, he'd come by and we'd see him. And I'd be like, and they would live not far from me. And I'm like, wait, he saw you, but he didn't see me and I'm his sister? Like, it was interesting. And it made me think he maybe never felt like he belonged anywhere. Like no one, like I felt like he was my brother. And obviously he knew I was his sister, but he also felt like I don't know, he was like a part of everyone in the family.
I also think you're the person, I mean, just knowing you two from outside, I think you're the person that he felt most close to and that you had his number type of thing. Like you really, I mean, you're a very deep, spiritual, philosophical person.
Yeah.
And if Kenny was feeling insecure about anything, you'd know. Because I remember you'd be like, and so that's an avoidance too, if you're going through stuff like.
That's true. Yeah. So it was interesting. So like when he had his daughter, I would see them like maybe once a year, but I wanted to see them more. Yeah. And so after he passed away, I see him, except for COVID, I see his wife, because she wants his daughter to know his family.
I love that.
She makes the effort more than Kenny did. So I see them more now than I did when Kenny was around, which is
maybe
a bummer.
That's a healing thing though.
I mean, yeah, for her, but like, I wish I saw them that much when he was around because I wanted him in my life, Yes. So, but it was interesting. And it was, I guess almost like the week before he died, almost everyone that was at the funeral said, oh, Kenny reached out to me.
Wow.
Out of the blue, which is interesting. Like, did he know?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. It was very interesting. So I don't know. Yeah. But
wow.
I thought that was so interesting when I found out he was seeing all these other random relatives. And then he was close to, but like, I'm like, why are you seeing them? I'm your sister,
Yeah. I think it's that. But I think it's maybe, like an Louise, avoidance.
Maybe you're right. Maybe you're right.
I mean, we all do that. I kind of hide from the people. Like, I don't want to have an answer.
You're right. Because maybe it brings up those wounds for him. And maybe he was avoiding the truth of whatever it was,
Hiding from it. He was a loving, beautiful, spiritual person though. It's a neat, like his essence, just smiling.
Yeah, he had a beautiful smile. It always won over my friends.
You have to send us a picture of him. Maybe.
All the friends had a crush on him. Like
he dated almost all my friends, you guys, and I did not want it. And I was like, Kenny, I'm not a dating service.
Well, it's adorable the minute you meet him. Like,
but he was literally like, until he met his wife, he was literally like one of those guys that just could charm the pants off of every woman.
Anybody.
And then like, he kind of made me realize that most guys that are jerks don't know they are, because he didn't get that he was like screwing over some of my friends. I'm like, Kenny, they know each other. He's like, why is that bad? Like, he did not get it. And like, he didn't do it intentionally. And I was like, wow.
For himself. Yeah.
Or I don't know. Like, he just didn't get that like a woman might be sad that he's seeing two women at the same time, or like they're overlapping.
Well, Sarah and I have talked about this. A lot of adopted kids or kids with that whole actually are promiscuous. So even though he's a boy, so for women we say promiscuous or whatever, but for a boy, you're also filling a void. Like
there's another
that's
sexist angle of the women are promiscuous, the guys are studs.
I know, right? Well, that's he was being a stud. Let's just say,
right? Apparently, but he's searching. It's that.
Yeah, it is.
Well, because he wanted that, the validation, I guess.
Validation,
right?
Yeah, I'm lovable or something.
Lovable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, he really wanted that. I mean, just even as a friend. Yeah.
Yeah. And then those dimples and the eye and the smile, like he could have been like a Latino, like Hollywood, heartthrob. Cause he just, like I said, every one of my friends just like loved
all
him.
three of your brothers.
Oh yeah. All my brothers.
you guys
Oh yeah. Every single, like all my friends
cutie.
could pick one of my brothers. They'd be like, I like him. I'm like, my God, you guys.
Are they single? No.
Yeah.
No.
No, sadly. And I
We've
wasn't
all
allowed to
asked
date
the question.
I wasn't allowed to date any of my brother's friends. So I think there was something is unfair,
Another double standard.
Another double standard.
Well, thank God we've met those friends now.
Oh God. Well, wow. What are your feelings like, just to wrap it up? Like, you've been listening to our podcast, so you related to, you saw, like, even though you grew up with thinking he's your brother, now you can see, oh, the adoption really.
Yeah. Well, I
affected
guess
him.
listening to all the episodes, because I've listened to every episode you guys have done.
Thank you very much.
I love it. It's just, first of all, I'm so proud of you guys, but I also love it. I think you guys are doing such a good job.
Authentically, you're like, I really love this.
No, I really do. I'm so excited for you guys, because it's such a, like I said, it's such a great thing. And I think it's really going to help a lot of people that don't even know they're looking for this, and even for me, like I wasn't listening to it because of Kenny. I just was like, oh, this is really good. So I think people are going to stumble upon this that aren't even paying attention, don't need to, find out about adoption stuff. But for Kenny, I guess as I was listening to both of your stories and then other guests you've had so far, I'll text Louise like, oh my gosh, this is Kenny. This is what he went through. And so all that stuff is so interesting. And in one hand, I'm sad he's not around to be able to listen to your podcast, because maybe
we have him on.
Yeah, to have him on and to even just hear, because maybe that would have been the missing component for him for healing. Maybe those would have been some of the things that would have helped him work through it, because he definitely struggled. He did. He, like I said, he had the anger issues. He wanted to fight people all the time for no reason. One bad look, he wanted to fight.
I'll kill you.
What? He
was a fighter.
He instantly went to that, and just the wounds that were always there that just didn't heal, and it's sad. Like I said, even with the therapy, it was, and who knows, maybe he needed another therapist or another kind of therapy. I don't know.
But at least like
ever heal, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know that all the way. Not sure it ever heals all the way.
And maybe it doesn't.
I think if he had stayed alive, the growth with his child is kind of what starts to heal. From what we hear,
I think
with guests with older children, that's the healing sort of journey there.
Yeah, I think
certainly for me, it has been with
with
my son. For sure.
I think that's what it would have, because that's what I was seeing with his wife, because they were such a good team, and she just understood him. She just had so much patience and didn't see the anger. She didn't see it at all. I was like, how do you not see that? Like, it just didn't bother her. She was so easygoing, and so that's why she was so perfect for him. So that was healing him.
I love he found that.
Actually. Me too. I was just going to say, I'm so glad he had that at the end of his life, got to have those two relationships.
I am, and then the daughter just healed him too, so like, you don't want that, if I could, wave a magic wand and make him still be here. Of course, I wish he was, but the fact that he got to have the wife and the child that healed him, and the joy and the love that he didn't get.
Yeah.
That he didn't get. So it was nice that, it's a good way for him to go.
And he did get it. He couldn't bring it in because you guys are the most.
He couldn't bring it in.
When I became friends with you, I spent my first few Thanksgivings away from Colorado with Denise's family, and it was like love, and I mean, like, you're just loved. You're like your mom. I feel like she's one of my mom. If I see your mom, I'm a daughter. I know. Like, the love is big in your family.
Yeah.
It's so nice. Yeah. That's so great. I'm so happy you came on today, Denise. I really like just having another perspective,
Thanks. Thank you. This was awesome. This was awesome to be able to talk about Kenny, and I didn't even
honor him.
And I didn't even realize it was 10 years this year. So when to think about that, I was like, wow, maybe there was a reason why,
It's for you as well.
It was.
Yeah.
It was nice to be able to, think about all these things that I hadn't thought about in who knows how long. So thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Okay.